found yourself pulling away from people when life gets hard? You think, oh, I'd rather be alone, or nobody's going to understand, or I just don't want to talk about this. Well, I get that, and I've been there too, so I do understand that. But this week I'm going to talk about community, why it is so important, why it helps us heal, and why being in community is so important to our healing. We heal better together. Hi, I'm Terri. I am the founder of Inspired Wellness Holistic Health Coaching, where I help autoimmune warrior women like me return to health and vitality through lifestyle medicine and my 9 pillars of health. Before my autoimmune condition erupted and I became very sick, I used to be very busy, very productive. I lived under a constant state of stress. I don't know why I did that looking back, but I viewed being busy like a badge of honor, and it really wasn't. I did a lot of things for a lot of people, and I just wasn't taking care of myself. I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't even think about it actually until my condition stopped me in my track and everything changed. And that was the point in time where friends gathered around me. My family really supported me. And if not for my family, I don't know where I would be. But they were incredibly supportive. And I had to learn to accept support like that this was definitely a time in my life that I needed help. And I was very thankful for those sweet relationships that I had built. The people that we surround ourselves with make a huge impact on our lives. They encourage us, they pray for us, they come alongside us, they help us in time of need, and in turn, we help them in time of need. It is a beautiful thing. God designed us to live in relationship with other people. It is so fulfilling and so helpful. We are not made to do life alone. But on the contrary, sometimes it can feel like you want to be alone or you prefer to be alone. And as you carry on with that idea and that thought pattern, isolation begins to set in. And with isolation then comes depression and really negative things. So isolation is not where God intended for us to be. He wants us to be in community with other people. It is such a blessing. Being in community with other people reminds us that we are not walking the path alone. There are people right there supporting us and helping us through the path, or at least they care. Just knowing that they care is sometimes more than enough. Let's be clear though, being in community does not cure an autoimmune condition, but it makes it so much easier to navigate. And it is a navigation, sometimes nightmare, depending on the severity of your condition. But God did not intend us to walk it alone. He intended us to do it with people. And when you walk the path with people, doesn't it seem to make it easier? At least it takes your mind off yourself totally. And it just tends to ease the burden a bit. That's how God intended it. The research continues to show that being in community reduces stress and increases resilience. And that's not an accident. That's how God created us to be. And it's part of His design for our lives. One other thing that I've learned is that community is not just about receiving support, but it's about giving support, being there for other people too, seeing needs, acknowledging needs, and serving other people. God tells us in 2 Corinthians chapter 1 that God comforts us in our troubles so that we can likewise comfort others. I have a personal story about that. There was a time several years ago when I was scheduled to have my first IVIG infusion. Now, I won't go into explaining what that is, but it is an infusion where you have to go into the hospital 5 days a week as an outpatient and have an IV put in your arm and receive a drug. And it takes all day because it goes in slow. And everybody is different. So when you first do this for the very first time, you have no idea how your body is going to respond. For some people, it's no problem. And for some other people, it makes them sick. I was scheduled to do that, and it was the week before Christmas one year. And I shared about it with my ladies' Bible study group that I had this appointment scheduled. And I was thankful that insurance had finally approved it, but gosh, the timing was really bad. I didn't want to get sick right before Christmas in case it affected me that way. Well, the day finally came to go and have this done, and they didn't tell me I couldn't drive, so I was absolutely going to drive myself there. And I was preparing to leave the house that morning of the appointment when my phone rang. And it was a good friend of mine who was also in the Bible study group. And she was just calling to encourage me about this appointment. And then she asked if I would like her to drive me there. And I said, oh, well, thank you, but no, that's completely unnecessary. I'm very capable of driving myself, and they didn't tell me that I can't drive, so I'm fine. And plus, if you took me, you'd have to come back and get me, and it's a ways away. It's a half hour away, and I don't want you to have to do that, and it's just not necessary. Well, my friend, bless her heart, said, oh, but what if I want to do this for you? And again, I said, well, it's not necessary. And we ended the phone conversation and hung up. Less than 5 minutes later, bling, the phone rings again. And it's my dear friend once again saying, Terri, I am coming to get you. I will be there in 5 minutes. She lived nearby. And I'm like, didn't we just have this conversation that I don't need this? I don't want you to have to do this. Terri, I am coming to do this. I want to do this. Well, what was I going to say? And time was short. It was almost time to go, and she was on her way. So I said, okay, and I hung up the phone. She came, and oh my goodness, I did not realize my need at that point in time, but we had a beautiful ride on the way there. Like I said, it was a half-hour drive, and just chatted, and it really just eased my mind. And just knowing that somebody, my friend, cared and that she loved me and wanted to support me in this way. That was just such a blessing. I wrote about this story in my book, and she is very dear to my heart, not just for that, but she really is a wonderful, caring and giving person. And people like that really rise to the top in your life. Those are special kinds of friends. So I make it a point, I fail at this. I don't have the same heart that she does, but I try to see that need. And sometimes you have to put your own life aside and see that need, but it is a blessing to other people when you can do that. I think it's normal when we have a chronic illness to ask ourselves, why me, God? Why did this happen? I lived healthy, or I thought I did, and why did this happen? And we don't have an answer to that, and God usually doesn't give us the answer, but there is a reason. However, what God can do with that, and will do with that if you allow it, is to use your struggles to help somebody else. You've gone through a really rough patch, and there's other people that are going through the same type of rough patch, and you are perfectly situated to be able to offer them comfort and care and just a listening ear, because you really do understand. And that's a blessing when you're willing to share your story in that way. So I want to leave you with a bit of encouragement. Think about your circle of friends or the people you know, whether they're close or not, and think, who needs some support right now? Who needs some care? Who needs to know that I'm thinking about them? And reach out to that person with just a text or a call or an invitation to coffee, something that lets them know that you are thinking about them and that you care about them. Even just some small act can be very meaningful to someone that is going through a rough patch. If there's one thing I want you to remember through this video, it's that healing doesn't just happen through proper nutrition or good sleep or reduced stress or exercise, but it also happens through meaningful relationships. And we need to take the time to cultivate those, because they don't just happen overnight, and they don't happen without intentionality. God created us to encourage each other and to be in relationship. So I hope that you will accept that challenge, and I will see you next week. Take care, friends. God bless.